At 5:10 in the morning, I was already pressing my stepbrother's suit for a wedding I was not really invited to. My parents raised me to be invisible, grateful, and busy, treating me like unpaid staff in my own home. That arrangement worked perfectly for 27 years. It ended the second the bride's billionaire father looked at my face and realized exactly who I was. I am Kendall Graham, 27 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I have existed in the silent, suffocating margins of this family. The house was dead quiet at 5:10 in the morning, a silence that felt heavy and expensive, the kind you only find in neighborhoods like Rosemont Heights, where the lawns are manicured to within a millimeter of their lives, and the driveways are long enough to keep the rest of the world at bay. I was standing in the utility room, the air thick with the smell of lavender starch and hot metal, pressing a razor-sharp crease into a pair of charcoal suit trousers that belonged to my stepbrother, Colton. My hand moved the iron with a muscle memory that bypassed conscious thought. Steam hissed, rising up to dampen the loose strands of hair around my face. This was my morning ritual, my rent, my penance for existing, while the rest of the Graham household slept in their temperature-controlled suites. I was ensuring their lives looked seamless by the time their feet hit the floor. The coffee maker was already set to brew a specific Colombian blend at 5:30. The vitamins were laid out in little ceramic dishes. The daily schedules were printed and placed on the marble island in the kitchen, right next to the bowl of organic lemons that nobody ever ate but Cynthia insisted looked fresh. Technically, on paper, Miles and Cynthia Graham are my parents. They are the people who signed the forms, the people whose last name is stamped on my driver's license. But in the quiet reality of this house, they are my employers who pay me in shelter and guilt. They have a script they love to recite, usually when I am tired or when I have hesitated for a split second before fulfilling a request. They like to remind me that I was a tragic case, a charity project they took on out of the goodness of their Christian hearts. They say I am lucky to be here, lucky to be off the streets, lucky to have a roof over my head in one of the most prestigious zip codes outside of Dallas. And the price of that luck is a lifetime of servitude disguised as gratitude. By 6 in the morning, the sun was beginning to bleed through the sheer curtains of the kitchen, casting long, pale shadows across the pristine white counters. I heard the heavy tread of Miles coming down the stairs. He is a man who takes up space aggressively, broad-shouldered and loud, with a face that turns red when he talks about money or politics. He walked into the kitchen, ignoring me the way one ignores a refrigerator or a thermostat, and went straight for the coffee I had just poured. Cynthia followed a moment later, her silk robe trailing behind her like a royal train. She is a woman made of sharp angles and hairspray. Her smile always tight, as if she is afraid cracking it too wide might shatter the porcelain of her face. She sat at the island, and I silently slid a plate of sliced melon and toast toward her. She did not say thank you. She just picked up her phone and started scrolling. Then there was Colton. My stepbrother came bounding down 20 minutes later, looking like a catalog model even with sleep in his eyes. He is 2 years older than me, charming in a way that works on everyone except the people who have to clean up after him. Colton is the sun this family orbits around. He has the smile, the jawline, and the absolute lack of ambition that comes from never hearing the word no. And today, the orbit was spinning faster than usual because Colton Graham was getting married. He was not just marrying anyone, he was marrying Maris Vale. The name Vale means something in Texas. It means real estate empires, skyscrapers in downtown Dallas, and a level of wealth that makes the Grahams look like they are playing dress-up. Maris is the daughter of Gideon Vale, a man whose name is etched into the limestone of half the buildings in the city, for Miles and Cynthia. This wedding is not a celebration of love. It is a merger. It is their desperate, clawing ascent into the social stratosphere they have been trying to buy their way into for 30 years. I went back to the utility room to hang the trousers, checking my reflection in the dark window. I look nothing like them. I do not have the Graham heavy brow or the wide, flat nose. My face is narrower. My eyes a dark, unsettled hazel that always seems out of place in family photos. Not that there are many family photos with me in them. That brings me to the rules, the shadow rules. Growing up, I learned quickly that there were two sets of laws in the Graham house. There were the spoken rules, like keeping my room tidy and making good grades. Then there were the unspoken ones, the ones that carried a heavier penalty. Rule number 1 was that I did not eat at the main dining table when guests were over. Cynthia would say it was because the table was full, or that I would be more comfortable in the kitchen. But the message was clear. I disrupted the aesthetic. Rule number 2 was that I never, ever called them mom or dad in public. It just confuses people. Kendall, Cynthia had told me once, adjusting my collar with ice-cold fingers before a church service, you do not look like us. We do not want people asking awkward questions that might embarrass you. So I became Kendall, just Kendall, the girl who lived in the house, the ward, the assistant, the staff with a last name. I walked back into the kitchen to clear the plates. On the counter, resting on a silver tray, was a heavy cream envelope, the wedding invitation. I had seen boxes of them being sent out weeks ago, but I had never actually held one. I picked it up. The cardstock thick and textured under my thumb. The calligraphy was gold, raised and elegant. Mr. and Mrs. Miles Graham request the honor of your presence at the marriage of their son, Colton James Graham, to Maris Elizabeth Vale. I stared at the words. Their son, not their children, not Colton and his sister. I turned the envelope over. It was addressed to the Graham family. I felt a hollow ache in my chest, a familiar coldness that I had learned to ignore. I was 27 years old, and I was not even a footnote on my own brother's wedding invitation. I was not family. I was part of the furniture, included in the general Graham family address only because I lived at the same physical location. Kendall. Cynthia's voice snapped me back to reality. She was standing in the doorway, already dressed in a sharp beige suit, her eyes scanning me for flaws. Put that down, she said, her voice smooth and devoid of warmth. We need to talk about the weekend. I placed the invitation back on the tray. Good morning. Cynthia, I have the schedule for the rehearsal dinner printed out. Good. She walked over, her heels clicking on the tile. Now, listen to me. This weekend is crucial. Gideon Vale is going to be watching everything. This is a massive opportunity for your father. For Colton, we cannot have any hiccups. I nodded, waiting for the instructions. I assumed I would be seated at a back table, perhaps with the distant cousins or the business associates nobody really knew. We have decided that it is best if you help coordinate the logistics, she said, picking up a grape and inspecting it. I blinked. Logistics. Yes, someone needs to manage the gifts, ensure the vendors are on time, and handle any emergencies with the wardrobe. You are so good at those little details. Kendall, you are organized. We thought it would be a perfect way for you to contribute. She meant I was working. I was not going to be a guest. I was going to be an unpaid wedding planner, a glorified runner in a black dress, carrying headsets and clipboards while my family drank champagne. I felt a flash of anger, hot and sharp, but I swallowed it down. It was the rent. It was the price of the roof. Does Colton know? I asked quietly. Colton has enough on his mind, Cynthia said, her eyes narrowing slightly. Don't bother him with your pettiness. This is his moment. You should be grateful you can help him shine. After everything we have done for you, Kendall, a little support is not too much to ask. There it was. The debt. The invisible ledger that never balanced. Of course, I said, my voice flat. I will make sure everything runs smoothly. Wonderful. Cynthia smiled, a terrifying baring of teeth that did not reach her eyes. Wear something discreet, black, nothing that draws attention. We want the focus on Maris and Colton. She turned and left the kitchen, her perfume lingering in the air like a chemical weapon. I stood there for a moment, gripping the edge of the granite counter until my knuckles turned white. I was the help. I had always been the help. They just stopped pretending otherwise. I spent the rest of the morning running errands. I picked up the dry cleaning. I confirmed the floral arrangements. I drove 40 minutes to pick up a specific type of cigar Miles wanted for the groomsmen. By the time I returned to the house, it was early afternoon. The house was buzzing with activity. A makeup team was there for Cynthia. Miles was on the phone in his study, the door slightly ajar. I walked past the study with a stack of garment bags over my shoulder, intending to go upstairs. But Miles's voice stopped me. He was speaking in that low, intense tone he used when he was closing a deal. It is a done deal. Bob, I am telling you, once the vows are said, we are in. Vale has connections that will triple our portfolio in a year. This marriage is the ticket up. We just have to get through the weekend without looking like the desperate suburbanites we are. I paused, holding my breath. What about the girl the voice on the speakerphone asked? It sounded like their family attorney. Kendall Miles laughed, a harsh barking sound. Don't worry about her. Cynthia has her handling the back of house. She knows her place. We just need to keep her out of the way. She doesn't exactly fit the image, if you know what I mean. Gideon Vale is old money. He expects pedigree. Kendall as well. She is baggage. We keep her grateful. We keep her busy. And we keep her invisible. The words hit me like a physical blow. Baggage. Keep her invisible. I moved away from the door before he could see me, my heart hammering against my ribs. I climbed the stairs to my room, the garment bags heavy on my shoulder. My room was the smallest in the house, originally intended for storage or perhaps a nursery that never happened. It was neat, sterile, and devoid of personality because I had learned long ago that personality takes up space, and I was not allowed to take up space. I hung the suits on the rack and walked over to the mirror. I looked at myself. I saw the dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, the lack of makeup, the tired eyes. I saw the person they had constructed, a servant, a ghost. Why I whispered to the reflection, "Why do you hate me so much?" I had asked myself that question 1,000 times. Was I unlovable? Was I broken? Or was I just a convenient tax write-off that learned how to do laundry? I thought about running. I thought about getting in my 10-year-old sedan and driving until the gas ran out. But where would I go? I had $600 in a savings account I had managed to hide from them. I had no connections. I had been isolated so thoroughly that the world outside Rosemont Heights felt like a foreign planet. And then, there was the fear, the deep, ingrained fear that they were right, that I was nothing without them, that I owed them my life. My phone buzzed on the dresser, vibrating against the wood. The screen lit up with a notification, bright and demanding in the dim room. Reminder rehearsal dinner, Preston Crest Club, 6:00 p.m., vendor check-in, 4:30 p.m. I stared at the screen. I had to go. I had to put on the black dress. I had to go and ensure that the ice sculptures were not melting and that the napkins were folded into swans. I had to go and watch my brother marry into a dynasty while I stood in the shadows. I did not know it then, but I was looking at the face of the old Kendall Graham for the last time. The girl in the mirror was about to die, and the woman who would take her place was going to burn this entire house to the ground. I grabbed my car keys, smoothed down my hair, and walked out the door. The rehearsal dinner was waiting, and so was the ghost that was about to walk back into the room. The Preston Crest Club smelled of old mahogany, lemon polish, and money that had been laundered until it was crisp. It was the kind of place where the air conditioning was always set to 68 degrees, and the lighting was designed to make wealthy people look 10 years younger. I had been inside this building a dozen times before, usually trailing behind Cynthia carrying her purse or running ahead to ensure their preferred table by the window was reserved. But tonight the atmosphere felt heavier. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the low, murmuring hum of people who owned the world and were politely bored by it. I adjusted the earpiece I'd been given by the wedding planner, a frantic woman named Sharon who had quickly realized that I was the only person in the Graham family who actually knew how to get things done. I was dressed in black slacks and a black silk blouse, an outfit chosen specifically to render me featureless. I was not a guest. I was infrastructure. While the other women in the room wore jewel tones and sequins that caught the amber light of the chandeliers, I was designed to absorb light, to disappear into the curtains and the corners. The rehearsal dinner was a choreographed display of casual elegance. Men in bespoke suits swirled scotch in heavy crystal tumblers, using the glass like a soft weapon to punctuate their sentences about mergers and acquisitions. The women laughed, a sound that was less about humor and more about signaling social compliance. I moved through the crowd with a silver tray of place cards that had been printed with a slight error in the font size. Something Cynthia had spotted instantly and demanded I fix with a calligraphy pen. I was invisible. I was safe, or so I thought. I was standing near the entrance to the terrace, waiting for a signal from the catering captain, when a hand touched my arm. It was not a rough grab, like Miles would use, or a pinching tap like Cynthia's. It was gentle, intentional. I turned around and found myself staring directly into the eyes of the bride. Maris Vale was even more stunning up close. She had the kind of effortless beauty that made you realize how much effort everyone else was putting in. Her hair was pulled back in a loose chignon, and her dress was a simple slip of cream silk that probably cost more than the car I drove. But it was her eyes that stopped me. They were intelligent, sharp, and currently fixed on my face with a look of genuine confusion. "Excuse me," she said, her voice cutting through the ambient noise of the party. "You are Colton's sister, right?" The question hung in the air between us. I nearly dropped the tray of place cards. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. In 27 years, no one outside of a school roster had ever referred to me as Colton's sister. To the neighbors, I was the ward. To the country club set, I was the charity case. To the staff, I was just the girl who did the work. I opened my mouth to answer, to say yes, to claim that title for the first time in my life, but the air was sucked out of the conversation before I could speak. "Oh, Maris, darling." Cynthia materialized out of the crowd like a heat-seeking missile. She was wearing emerald green, her smile fixed in place like it had been surgically attached. She stepped smoothly between me and Maris, her back partially blocking me from view. "You have met Kendall," Cynthia said, her voice dripping with a sickly sweet indulgence. "She is helping the team tonight. Kendall is so wonderful with the little details. She actually prefers to be in the background." Cynthia cast a quick, sharp glance over her shoulder at me, a warning shot that told me to shut up and fade away. "She is very introverted," Cynthia continued, turning back to Maris and placing a hand on the bride's forearm. "We try not to overwhelm her with the social side of things. It makes her anxious." "Right. Kendall," I stood there, a mannequin in black, gripping the silver tray until my fingers hurt. I was being erased in real time, rewritten as a socially awkward recluse who needed protection, rather than a daughter who was being hidden. "I like to be helpful," I managed to say, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Maris did not look at Cynthia. She looked over Cynthia's shoulder, her gaze finding mine again. There was a flicker of skepticism in her expression, a tiny crease between her brows that suggested she was not buying the narrative. "Well, it is nice to meet you properly. Kendall," Maris said firmly, "I hope you will sit down and eat something eventually. We are technically family now." Cynthia laughed, a high tinkling sound that sounded like glass breaking. "Oh, she will grab a plate in the kitchen later. Come, darling. Gideon is looking for you. He wants to introduce you to the senator." Cynthia steered Maris away, her grip on the bride's arm tight and proprietary. As they walked off, I let out a breath I did not know I had been holding. I felt exposed, raw, as if the skin had been peeled back from my life to reveal the rot underneath. I retreated to the edge of the room, near the bar, trying to make myself small again. I focused on the task at hand, organizing the seating chart for the head table, but I could feel a weight on me, a physical sensation of being watched. It is a specific feeling, the sensation of eyes on you. It usually means I have done something wrong, or that Miles is about to snap his fingers for a refill. I looked up, scanning the room, expecting to see Cynthia glaring at me from across the floor. Instead, I locked eyes with Gideon Vale. He was standing near the fireplace, a glass of bourbon in his hand, surrounded by 3 men who were laughing at something he had not said. Gideon was a legend in Texas. He was 60 years old, but looked 50. with salt and pepper hair, and a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite. He was not smiling. He was not participating in the polite rituals of the evening. He was staring at me. Most people in this tax bracket look at staff in two ways. They either look through you as if you are made of glass, or they look at your hands to see if you are holding the drink they ordered. Gideon Vale was doing neither. He was looking at my face. He was studying me with an intensity that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It was not a predatory look, and it was not a dismissive one. It was the look of a man trying to solve a puzzle that he did not know he was holding. I looked down, pretending to check the list in my hand. When I looked up again, he was moving. He walked through the crowd the way an icebreaker moves through a frozen sea. People parted for him, offering smiles and handshakes, but he ignored them all. He walked in a straight line, his eyes never leaving my face. I wanted to run. Every instinct I had honed over 2 decades of living with the Grahams told me to flee, to hide, to find a service corridor and vanish. But my feet felt leaden, stuck to the expensive Persian rug. He stopped 2 feet away from me, up close. He smelled of sandalwood and tobacco. His eyes were a startling shade of gray, piercing and clear, but there was something else in them now. Confusion, recognition, Kendall Graham, he said. He said my name slowly, testing the weight of it on his tongue, as if the 2 words did not belong together. "Yes, sir," I said, dropping into my professional voice. "Can I get you anything, Mr. Vale? A fresh drink." He ignored the offer. He took a step closer, invading my personal space in a way that felt less like aggression and more like desperation. He was searching my face, cataloging my features, my eyes, the line of my jaw, the shape of my nose. "Do you know who your real mother is?" he asked. The question was spoken softly, barely a whisper over the jazz music playing in the background, but it hit me with the force of a physical slap. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. This was a rehearsal dinner. We were surrounded by the elite of Dallas society. People were eating shrimp cocktail and discussing golf handicaps. You do not ask the help about their biological origins in the middle of a cocktail party. Excuse me," I stammered, stepping back. My back hit the wall. Gideon's hand, the one holding the heavy crystal glass, began to tremble. It was a subtle shake at first, the amber liquid rippling, and then it became violent. "Your mother," he rasped, his voice sounding wet and broken. "Do you know her name?" I stared at him, my mouth opening and closing without sound. I did not know. I had been told my parents were dead, junkies who died in a car wreck, nobodies who left me on a doorstep. That was the story Miles told when he was drunk, the story that made him the savior and me the stray dog. "Sir, I think you have had too much to—" The glass slipped. It did not fall because he was drunk. It fell because his fingers simply stopped working. The heavy crystal hit the marble border of the floor with a sound that cracked through the room like a gunshot. Shards exploded outward, glittering in the light. The bourbon splashed across his polished shoes and the hem of my black trousers. The music did not stop, but the conversation in our immediate radius died instantly. Gideon did not look down at the mess. He did not apologize. He looked as if he had seen a ghost walk out of a grave and put on a caterer's uniform. He brought a hand up to his mouth, covering a gasp that looked painful. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Gideon." The voice came from Miles. My stepfather, my employer, had appeared from the crowd, drawn by the sound of breaking glass. He looked from the shattered crystal to Gideon, and then his eyes snapped to me. Usually, when Miles looked at me in public, his expression was a mix of annoyance and warning. But tonight, for the first time in my entire life, I saw something else. Fear. It was naked. Raw panic. His face had drained of color, leaving his skin a pasty gray. His eyes darted between Gideon and me, and I saw his throat work as he swallowed. He was not angry that I had embarrassed the family. He was terrified of what was happening. "Mr. Vale had an accident," I said quickly, dropping to my knees to pick up the shards. "It is fine. I will clean it up. Get away from him." Miles hissed. It was not a command to protect Gideon. It was a desperate attempt to separate us. Gideon stepped back, almost stumbling. He looked at Miles, and the expression on the billionaire's face hardened into something unreadable. He did not say a word to Miles. He did not acknowledge the apology Miles was stuttering out. Gideon turned and walked away. He walked fast, pulling a cell phone from his interior pocket. He did not head for the bar or the bathroom. He headed straight for the exit doors that led to the private balcony. I watched him go, my hands hovering over the broken glass. I could see him through the glass doors of the terrace. He was pacing, the phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gesturing wildly at the empty night air. He looked like a man whose world had just been turned upside down. "Kendall, clean this up now," Cynthia hissed, appearing at Miles's elbow. She was smiling for the room, but her eyes were venomous. And then, "Go to the kitchen. Stay there. Do not come back out until the guests are gone." I nodded, gathering the sharp fragments of crystal into a linen napkin. I felt a stinging sensation in my thumb. I had cut myself on a shard. A thin line of red blood welling up against the white cloth. I stood up and hurried toward the service doors, keeping my head down. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. What had just happened? Why did Gideon Vale look at me like that? And why did Miles look like he was waiting for the executioner? As I pushed through the swinging doors into the service corridor, I nearly collided with a waiter carrying a tray of salmon. I murmured an apology and kept moving, desperate to find a sink and some cold water. Wait, the voice stopped me. It was not Miles or Cynthia. I turned around. Gideon Vale was standing at the other end of the service hallway. He must have come in through the back terrace door. He looked composed now, the trembling gone, replaced by a cold, terrifying focus. He was not looking at me with emotion anymore. He was looking at me with resolve. He walked toward me, ignoring the staff that bustled around us. He stopped a foot away. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy cream business card. He took a pen from his inside pocket and scribbled something on the back of it. He pressed the card into my hand. His fingers were warm and dry, his grip firm. "Do not show this to your parents," he said. He did not wait for an answer. He turned and walked back toward the party, adjusting his cufflinks as if nothing had happened. I looked down at the card in my hand. My blood from the cut on my thumb had smeared slightly on the edge, on the back, in sharp, angular handwriting. He had written 4 words. "Don't leave early." The Marlowe Grand Hotel in Dallas is the kind of place that charges $10,000 a night just for the privilege of breathing its air. It is a cathedral of limestone and velvet, a place where history is polished until it gleams and secrets are buried under layers of thick carpet. On the morning of my brother's wedding, the hotel looked like a fortress under siege by florists and lighting technicians. While the guests were arriving through the main atrium, walking under a chandelier that cost more than my entire college education would have, I was entering through the service bay on the loading dock. I walked past crates of imported champagne and racks of filet mignon, dodging a delivery truck backing up with a beep that echoed like a countdown. This was my station. I was not a guest. I was the oil in the machine. My black dress was identical to the one I wore the night before, functional and invisible. I clipped my access badge to my belt and took a service elevator up to the ballroom level. The doors opened, and the chaos hit me like a physical wave. The ballroom was being transformed into a Garden of Eden. Thousands of white hydrangeas were being arranged into towering sculptures. The scent was overwhelming, a cloying mix of fresh pollen and industrial floor cleaner. I did not have time to admire it. I had a clipboard in my hand and a headset in my ear. "Kendall, we are missing 3 boutonnieres for the groomsmen." Sharon, the wedding planner, screamed into my ear. "And the mother of the groom hates the napkin fold. Fix it." I started running. I found the florist in a panic near the stage, located the missing flowers in a mislabeled box, and personally pinned them onto the lapels of 3 hungover groomsmen who barely looked at me. I went to the reception tables and refolded 200 napkins into the bishop's hat style Cynthia suddenly decided was the only acceptable option. I steamed the veil. I located the ring bearer who had hidden under a table. I was everywhere and nowhere, a blur of motion that kept the fantasy intact. It was during a brief lull, while I was organizing the gift table in the foyer, that Miles found me. He did not look like the proud father of the groom. He looked like a man who had not slept. His skin was gray, and there was a sheen of sweat on his upper lip despite the aggressive air conditioning. He grabbed my elbow, his fingers digging into the tender flesh of my arm, and pulled me behind a pillar. "Listen to me," he said, his voice a low, jagged hiss. I looked at him, keeping my face impassive. "Yes." "Miles, stay away from Gideon Vale," he ordered. "I do not care what he asked you last night. I do not care if he tries to talk to you today. You tell him you are just helping out. You tell him you are busy. Do you understand?" His eyes were darting around the room, checking to see if anyone was watching us. He asked me a question. "Miles," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Why are you so afraid of a question? Do not play smart with me," he snapped, his grip tightening until I winced. "You are here to work. You are here because we allow you to be here. If you say one word to him that messes up this deal, if you cast even a shadow of doubt on this family, you will be on the street before the cake is cut. Do not test me. Kendall." He shoved me away and straightened his tuxedo jacket, pasting a smile onto his face as he walked back toward the guests. I rubbed my arm where his fingers had left red marks. He was not just controlling me anymore. He was containing a leak. The ceremony began at 4 o'clock. I watched it from the back of the ballroom, standing in the shadows of the heavy velvet drapes. The doors were closed, the lights dimmed to a romantic amber glow. A string quartet played something haunting and beautiful. I watched Colton stand at the altar, looking like a prince in his tuxedo. He looked confident, happy, the golden boy who had never known a day of want in his life. And then Maris walked down the aisle. She was breathtaking, a vision in lace and silk, but I noticed she did not look at the guests. She looked straight ahead, her face composed, her eyes unreadable. I stood there, surrounded by the smell of expensive perfume and the soft rustle of designer fabric, and I felt a profound sense of dislocation. I had grown up in the same house as the groom. I had folded his laundry, cooked his meals, helped him with his homework, and yet, I was not part of this. I was not in the program. I was not in the reserved seating. I was standing next to a waiter holding a tray of empty water glasses. I realized then that I had spent my entire life trying to earn a seat at a table that did not have a chair for me. The ceremony ended with a roar of applause, the doors swung open, and the guests flooded out for the cocktail hour. This was the most dangerous part of the day for me. I had to navigate the crowd, direct people to the bar, and collect the gifts, all while avoiding eye contact with the man who had looked at me the night before like I was a ghost. I managed to stay busy for an hour, dodging through the service corridors, moving boxes, checking in with the kitchen, but I could not avoid the inevitable, the photographs. The main ballroom had been cleared for the formal family portraits. A massive backdrop of white roses had been set up. The photographer, a celebrity shooter flown in from Los Angeles, who probably charged $20,000 a day, was barking orders and adjusting lights. Cynthia and Miles were there, preening. Colton and Maris were center stage. The bridesmaids, the groomsmen, the grandparents. Everyone was being shuffled into various configurations. I was standing off to the side, holding a bottle of water for Cynthia and a touch-up kit for Maris. I was part of the equipment. "Okay, let's get the immediate family," the photographer shouted, clapping his hands. "Parents of the groom, parents of the bride, and the couple. Let's go." Miles and Cynthia stepped in, beaming. Gideon Vale stood on the other side of Maris, looking solemn. His wife had passed away years ago, so he stood alone, a pillar of black wool and dignity. They took the shot. Flash, flash, flash. "Beautiful," the photographer yelled. "Now, just the Graham side, mom, dad, son." They huddled together, the perfect American family, Miles with his hand on Colton's shoulder, Cynthia tilting her head just so. I watched them, feeling a cold numbness spreading through my chest. They looked complete without me. They looked relieved without me. "Okay, got it," the photographer said, checking his digital screen. "Is that everyone for the immediate family?" He looked up, scanning the room. His eyes landed on me. I was standing 10 feet away, holding the water bottle, looking distinctly like I did not belong to the catering staff, but also did not belong to the wedding party. "Who is she?" the photographer asked, pointing at me with his light meter. "Is she a sister, cousins? If she is family, we need her in the frame." The silence that followed was absolute. It was not a quiet pause. It was a vacuum. The air left the room. Cynthia's smile froze into a rictus of panic. Miles shifted his weight, opening his mouth to speak, to say the line he had rehearsed, to say I was the assistant, the help, the distant relative who preferred to stay out of the pictures. "She is—" Cynthia started, her voice high and brittle. "She is family." A deep voice cut through the silence. It was not Colton. It was Gideon. Gideon Vale walked out of the frame he was standing in. He walked across the polished floor, his steps echoing in the silent room. He did not look at Miles. He did not look at Cynthia. He looked at me. He stopped in front of me and gently took the water bottle from my hand, placing it on a nearby table. Then, he took my arm. His grip was firm, grounding, the opposite of the way Miles had grabbed me earlier. "Kendall, stand here," he said. He did not ask. He directed. He led me not to the edge of the group, but to the center. He positioned me right next to him, squarely in the middle of the frame, between himself and Maris. "Wait," Cynthia said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Gideon, surely Kendall is not dressed for she is working today. She does not want to ruin the aesthetic of the take the picture," Gideon said. He did not shout. He did not have to. When a man like Gideon Vale gives an order, the world tends to obey. The photographer sensed the tension. He was a professional. He saw the shift in power dynamics, and he adjusted instantly. "Okay, everybody, look at me," he shouted. "Chin down, smile." I stood there, frozen. I could feel the heat radiating from Cynthia's body 3 feet away. I could feel the confusion coming from Colton, but mostly, I could feel the presence of the man standing next to me. Gideon Vale was standing so close our shoulders were touching. He felt solid, real, flash. The light blinded me for a second. One more beautiful flash. I blinked, trying to clear the spots from my vision. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might bruise my ribs. I was in the official wedding photo. I was standing next to the billionaire father of the bride, while my own step-parents looked like they were about to have a stroke. "Okay, we got it," the photographer said. He turned to the computer monitor that was tethered to his camera to check the focus. Gideon did not move away from me. Instead, he leaned in, also looking at the monitor where the image had just appeared. I looked too. The photo was high definition, every detail razor sharp. There we were, Miles and Cynthia on the left, looking strained, Colton and Maris in the middle, and on the right, standing next to Gideon, was me. The resemblance was not subtle. It was terrifying. In the high-resolution image, stripped of the context of class and clothing, the bone structure was undeniable. I had Gideon's jawline. I had the same arch in my eyebrows. But more than that, I looked like someone else. I did not know who, but Gideon clearly did. He stared at the screen, his face draining of blood. He reached out a hand and touched the monitor, his finger tracing the pixelated image of my face. "Evelyn," he whispered. It was barely a sound. It was an exhale, a prayer, a ghost story told in one word. He turned to look at me, his eyes red-rimmed and swimming with tears. He looked like he wanted to hug me, or fall to his knees, or scream, but we were in a room full of people. We were on a stage. Gideon Maris asked softly, stepping closer, "Dad." Gideon took a shaky breath. He straightened up, pulling the mask of the billionaire back into place. But it was cracked now. "I need a moment," he said hoarsely. He turned and walked away from the set, heading toward the private dressing rooms. The photographer looked confused. The bridesmaids were whispering, and then Miles moved. He moved fast, like a snake striking. He grabbed my arm again, hard enough to bruise, and dragged me away from the group, toward the service exit. "We need to check the catering," he announced loudly to the room, his voice shaking. "Kendall, come with me." He dragged me out of the ballroom and into the service corridor. The heavy doors swinging shut behind us, cutting off the music and the chatter. The hallway was empty, lined with stacks of chairs and discarded boxes. He shoved me against the wall. His face was purple with rage. Veins were bulging in his neck. "I told you," he snarled, stepping into my space until I could smell the sour wine on his breath. "I told you to stay invisible. What did you say to him? What lies did you feed him?" "Nothing," I cried, pushing back against the wall. He came to me. "I didn't say a word. You little ungrateful leech." He spat. "We took you in. We fed you. We gave you a name. And this is how you repay us, by trying to sabotage the biggest day of Colton's life, by trying to hustle a billionaire." He slammed his hand against the wall next to my head. "If you ruin this for me, Kendall, if you cost me this deal, I swear to God, you will wish you had never been born. You think you have it bad now. You have no idea what I can do. I will bury you. I will make sure you never get a job, never get a loan, never have a life in this state again. Do you hear me?" I stared at him. For years, I had been afraid of this man. I had cowered before his anger. I had let him make me small. But right now, looking at him, seeing the sweat on his forehead and the terror in his eyes, I realized something. He was not powerful. He was desperate. "I hear you, Miles," I said quietly. He glared at me, breathing hard. "Good. Now get back to work, and stay out of sight." He turned and stormed back toward the ballroom, fixing his jacket as he went. I stood there for a moment, shaking, trying to pull myself together. I needed to breathe. I needed to think. I turned around to walk down the hall, away from the ballroom, and I stopped dead. Maris was standing there. She was standing 10 feet away, in her $100,000 wedding dress, holding the train of lace in one hand. She was perfectly still. She had come out the side door, perhaps to use the private restroom, perhaps to find her father. She was looking at the spot where Miles had just been standing. Her face was pale, but her eyes were burning with a cold, sharp intelligence. She looked at me. There was no confusion in her face anymore. There was no polite social distance. She walked toward me, the silk of her dress rustling softly on the concrete floor. She stopped right in front of me. She reached out and touched my arm, right where Miles had grabbed me. "Did he hurt you?" she asked. I looked at her, stunned. It was my brother's wedding day. She should be worrying about her hair, or the cake, or the first dance. "I am fine," I stammered. Maris did not look convinced. She looked down the hallway where Miles had disappeared, and her expression was one of pure, unadulterated disgust. Then she looked back at me. "I heard him," she said. "I heard everything." She paused, her eyes searching mine. "Why does he think my father would care about you?" she asked. "And why is my father crying in the dressing room?" I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I did not have the answer, or maybe I did, and I was just too terrified to say it out loud. Maris took a deep breath. She looked like she was making a decision, a hard one. "Come with me," she said. "We're away from them," she said. "We need to talk, and I think we need to find my father." She turned and started walking down the hallway, her wedding dress sweeping the floor of the service corridor. I watched her for a second, the bride who was walking away from her own reception. I pushed off the wall and followed her. The party was going on without us, but the real story was happening in the back hallways, where the lies were starting to crack wide open. Maris did not take me to the ballroom. She did not take me to the bridal suite where her bridesmaids were likely touching up their lipstick and wondering where the star of the show had gone. Instead, she pulled me into a small, velvet-lined alcove near the elevators, a space designed for quiet conversations away from the chaotic joy of the reception. The heavy silk of her wedding dress took up most of the space, pressing against my legs, a physical reminder of the vast gulf between her world and mine. She let go of my arm and turned to face me. The hallway light caught the diamonds in her ears, making them flash like warning signals. She was not crying. She looked furious. But it was a cold, controlled fury that I found far more intimidating than Cynthia's theatrics. "Why do they treat you like that?" she asked. The question was direct, stripped of any social lubricant. It hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. I looked down at my hands, which were still trembling slightly from the encounter with Miles. I felt a flush of shame creep up my neck. It is a strange thing to be ashamed of your own mistreatment. But that is how abuse works. It convinces you that the cruelty is a result of your own failing, a reflection of your own lack of worth. "I do not know," I whispered. "They are strict. They have high standards." "Stop it," Maris said sharply. I looked up, startled. "Stop reciting the script," she said, her voice softening but losing none of its intensity. "I have seen strict families. Kendall, I grew up in one. My father is not exactly a warm and fuzzy man, but what I just saw in that hallway, that was not parenting. That was containment. That was fear." She stepped closer, the lace of her bodice rustling softly. "You are 27 years old. Kendall, you are not a child. You are not a servant. And yet, I watched your father grab you like you were a thief he had caught stealing silver. Why? Why are you so terrified of them?" I opened my mouth to answer, to defend them, to explain the debt I owed, the charity they had shown me, but the words died in my throat, because standing there, looking at this woman who had just married my brother, I realized I did not have an answer that made sense. Why did I let them treat me this way? Why did I believe that ironing shirts and hiding in kitchens was the only way to pay for my existence? "I do not have anywhere else to go," I admitted, the truth feeling like a stone dropping from my mouth. Maris stared at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded, as if confirming a suspicion. "You do now," she said. Before I could ask what she meant, the elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. Gideon Vale stepped out. He had removed his tuxedo jacket and loosened his tie, looking less like a titan of industry and more like a man who had just run a marathon. He looked at Maris, then at me. "Thank you, Maris," he said quietly. Maris nodded. "I will go handle the cake cutting. I will tell them you are taking a call. Do not take too long." She squeezed my hand a brief, fierce pressure and then swept back toward the ballroom, leaving me alone with the man who had started this earthquake. "Come with me," Gideon said. It was not a command. It was an invitation. He led me not back to the party, but to a service stairwell that opened onto a private terrace on the roof. The night air was cool and crisp, a welcome relief from the stifling perfume of the hotel. Below us, the city of Dallas sprawled out in a grid of golden light. Oblivious to the drama unfolding on this rooftop, the wind whipped at my loose strands of hair, and for the first time all day, I could breathe. Gideon walked to the edge of the parapet and gripped the stone railing. He stood there for a long time, staring out at the skyline, his knuckles white. I stood a few feet behind him, shivering slightly in my thin silk blouse, waiting for the axe to drop. "I met a woman 30 years ago," he began, his voice low and carried away by the wind. "Her name was Evelyn Keene." I stayed silent. The name meant nothing to me. Yet the way he said it made my chest ache. "She was not from my world," Gideon continued, turning his head slightly to look at me. "My family, the Vales, we have certain expectations, dynastic expectations. I was young. I was arrogant. I thought I could have everything I wanted. I thought I could keep her and the money." He let out a short, bitter laugh. "I was wrong. My father found out. He threatened to cut me off. To destroy her career, she was a musician, a cellist. She had so much talent. They made it very clear that she was not welcome." He turned fully to face me now. The moonlight washed out the color in his face, making him look older, more vulnerable. We fought. I was weak. I told her we needed to take a break, to let things cool down. I went to Europe for 6 months on family business. When I came back, she was gone. Her apartment was empty. Her number was disconnected. My family told me she had taken a payoff and left town. They showed me a check with her signature on it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a leather wallet. His fingers fumbled slightly as he extracted a small, square photograph. It was old, the edges soft and worn, as if it had been held and looked at 1,000 times. I believed them. He whispered, "For 28 years. I believe she took the money and ran. I hated her for it. I married Maris's mother. I built my empire, and I buried Evelyn Keene in the part of my brain where I keep my failures." He took a step toward me and held out the photo. "Look at this." I hesitated. My hand felt heavy as I reached out. I took the photograph. It was a candid shot, taken perhaps in a park. The colors were faded to that nostalgic 70s hue. A woman was laughing, looking away from the camera. She had long, dark hair that fell in waves around her shoulders. She was wearing a simple sundress. I looked at her face. The world stopped. The wind stopped. The noise of the city below faded into a dull hum. I was looking at myself. It was not just a resemblance. It was a mirror image. The shape of her eyes, the slightly crooked way she smiled, the arch of her brow, even the way her hair curled at the temples was identical to mine. I had seen this face every morning in the bathroom mirror, usually looking tired and drawn. But here she was, vibrant and alive and happy. "Who is she?" I asked, my voice trembling. "She is the woman I loved," Gideon said, his voice cracking. "And I think she was pregnant when she left." I shook my head, backing away. No, that is not possible. My parents, the Grahams. They told me my parents died in a car accident. They were friends of the family. They took me in. Did they, Gideon asked, or was that just the story that was easiest to tell? He stepped closer, his gray eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that burned. "Kendall, look at the timeline. You are 27. Evelyn disappeared 28 years ago. The resemblance is not a coincidence. Biology does not lie like people do." He reached out, as if to touch my shoulder, but stopped himself. "I am not saying I know for sure." He said, "I am a man of data. I need proof. But my gut has not felt like this since the day she walked out of my life." He took a deep breath. "I want us to take a DNA test. Tonight, tomorrow, as soon as possible. I can have a team here in an hour. It will be discreet. No one needs to know. Not Miles, not Cynthia, not even Maris. If you do not want." The offer hung there, terrifying and seductive. A DNA test. A simple swab of the cheek that could rewrite my entire history. If he was right, then everything I knew, my name, my debt to the Grahams, my very identity was a lie. If he was right, I was not a charity case, I was a veil. But the fear was stronger than the hope. The conditioning of 27 years does not vanish in a single conversation. "You are wrong," I said, handing the photo back to him. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped it. "I am a Graham. Legally. They raised me. They have my birth certificate. Papers can be forged." "Kendall," Gideon said gently, "histories can be bought. I cannot do this," I said, backing toward the door. "I cannot do this to them. They are my family. Today is Colton's wedding." Gideon looked at me with profound sadness. "They treat you like a servant. Kendall, I saw it. Maris saw it. Do you really owe them your loyalty? Or are you just afraid of what happens if you stop serving them? That is enough." I snapped, the anger flaring up to cover the panic. "I need to get back to work. Please, just leave me alone." I turned and ran. I fled the terrace, the wind, and the terrifying hope in Gideon Vale's eyes. I needed to be Kendall the assistant again. I needed a task. I needed a list. I needed something small and manageable to drown out the voice in my head that was screaming that he was right. I took the service elevator down to the ballroom level, my heart pounding against my ribs. I needed to find Cynthia. I needed to report in. I needed to ground myself in the familiar toxicity of her control. I checked the ballroom, but she was not there. I checked the bridal suite, empty. I remembered she had mentioned something about checking the vendor contracts earlier. There was a small business center near the coat check that the hotel had let us use as a staging area. I walked toward it, my heels silent on the plush carpet. The door was slightly ajar. I heard a sound from inside. It was a mechanical grinding noise. Whir, whir. I pushed the door open just an inch. Cynthia was standing by the desk. She had a portable shredder, one she must have brought from home or requested from the hotel, plugged into the wall. A leather briefcase was open on the desk, spilling over with yellowed documents. She was not the poised, icy woman I knew. She was frantic. Her hair was coming loose from its pins. She was jamming papers into the shredder, one after another. Her movements jerky and desperate. Faster. Damn it, she muttered to the machine. I watched, frozen. Why was she shredding documents in the middle of her son's wedding reception? She grabbed a handful of papers and shoved them in. The machine jammed. It let out a high-pitched whine. Cynthia cursed and yanked the paper back out, tearing it in half, in her haste. A few scraps fluttered to the floor, landing near the wastebasket. She did not notice. She cleared the jam and kept feeding the machine. I stepped back, letting the door close silently. I waited until I heard the shredder stop and the sound of Cynthia zipping up her bag. I hid in the alcove of the ice machine down the hall. I watched her leave the room, smoothing her dress, putting the mask back on before she re-entered the hallway. Once she was gone, I slipped into the room. The smell of ozone and hot paper hung in the air. The shredder bin was full of confetti. I could not piece that back together, but my eyes went to the floor, where the few scraps had fallen. I knelt down and picked one up. It was a triangular piece of paper, thick and yellowed with age. It looked like the corner of a legal document. There were only 2 words legible on the fragment, printed in a typewriter font that spoke of a different decade. Placement, and below it, partially cut off, but unmistakable veil. I stared at the scrap of paper. Placement, as in adoption placement, as in foster placement, and veil. My breath caught in my throat. This was not a coincidence. Gideon's story about a payoff, Miles's panic, the photo, and now this. Cynthia was destroying evidence. She was erasing the paper trail that connected me to the man who had looked at me with tears in his eyes. I put the scrap of paper in my bra, against my skin, where no one could find it. I went back to the party. I worked. I smiled. I handed out glow sticks for the final dance. I watched Colton and Maris drive away in a vintage Rolls-Royce. I played my part until the bitter end. It was nearly 2 a.m. when I finally got back to the Graham house. The silence of the house felt different now. It felt like a lie. I walked into my room and closed the door. I turned on the lamp and sat on the edge of my bed. Too exhausted to take off my shoes, I reached into my bag to get my phone. My hand brushed against something cold and plastic. I pulled it out. It was a cheap, prepaid burner phone. I had never seen it before. I stared at it. How did it get there? Someone must have slipped it into my open tote bag while I was distracted, maybe during the loadout. Maybe when I was getting my car. The screen lit up. There was one unread text message. I unlocked it. There was no passcode. The message was from a number I did not know. If you want the truth, keep this. Do not use your regular phone. They monitor the bill. I will wait for your call. G. I sat there in the dim yellow light of the room that had been my prison cell for 2 decades. I looked at the prepaid phone in one hand and the scrap of paper I had pulled from my bra in the other. Placement, veil. For 27 years. I had believed I was unwanted. I had believed I was a burden that the Grahams carried out of kindness. I had let them make me a servant because I thought I owed them for my survival. But looking at these 2 objects, a new thought took root in my mind. It started small, but it grew fast, like a vine strangling a tree. What if I wasn't a burden? What if I was an asset? What if I was a paycheck they had been cashing for 27 years? I stood up and walked to the mirror. I looked at my face, the face Gideon Vale had recognized, the face Cynthia had tried to keep out of the photographs. I am not Kendall Graham. I whispered to the reflection. I did not know who I was yet, but for the first time in my life, I knew who I was not. I was not their daughter. I was their hostage, and the ransom had just been paid. The morning after the wedding, I woke up expecting the usual hangover of verbal abuse. I expected Miles to be screaming about the catering bill or Cynthia to be critiquing the way I had folded the napkins. Instead, I walked into the kitchen and found myself in the middle of a scene from a sitcom that I had never been cast in before. There was a plate of blueberry pancakes on the island. Fresh coffee was brewing. And Cynthia was humming. "Good morning, sweetie," she said, turning around with a smile that looked like it had been practiced in a mirror. "Did you sleep well? You worked so hard yesterday. We were just saying how proud we are of you." I froze in the doorway. My hand instinctively went to the waistband of my pajama pants. Checking for the burner phone I had taped to my hip. This was wrong. Cynthia did not call me sweetie. She called me Kendall. Or she called me nothing at all. Miles was sitting at the table, reading the Wall Street Journal. He looked up, his eyes bloodshot from the whiskey, but his expression was eerily benign. "Grab a plate, kiddo," he said, gesturing to the pancakes. "You need your strength. Take the day off. No chores today. Just relax." The hair on my arms stood up. If they had screamed at me, I would have known how to react. I would have made myself small. But this kindness, this sudden, cloying warmth, it felt like walking through a minefield where the triggers were hidden under bouquets of flowers. It was not affection, it was a strategy. They were terrified. They knew Gideon Vale had spoken to me, and they were trying to gaslight me back into submission with syrup and pet names. I sat down, my movements stiff. "Thank you," I said, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. "We just want you to know," Cynthia said, pouring me coffee, "that we consider you a daughter. I know we are hard on you sometimes, but it is only because we want the best for you. The world is a tough place. Kendall, we have just been trying to prepare you." She touched my shoulder. Her hand felt like a cold clamp. I ate the pancakes. I drank the coffee. I played the part of the grateful orphan because I knew that if I broke character now, they would shut down whatever access I still had. Then Colton walked in. He was still wearing the t-shirt he had slept in, looking groggy and annoyed. Maris was not with him. She had likely stayed at the hotel or gone to see her father. Colton went straight to the fridge for a bottle of water, ignoring the family tableau. "Kendall," he said, without looking at me, "I need you to handle the thank you notes. The list of gifts is in a spreadsheet on my laptop. Just do the usual, generic but heartfelt. You are good at the meticulous stuff." He did not ask. He ordered, and just like that, the facade cracked. Cynthia's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but she did not correct him. I looked at Colton. He was 29 years old, a married man, and he was asking his sister to write the thank you notes for his wedding gifts. It was not just laziness, it was a fundamental lack of respect. To him, I was not a person with feelings or a life. I was a utility. I was a text generator. I was a machine that output gratitude, so he did not have to feel it. "Sure, Colton," I said, keeping my tone flat. "Send me the file." He grunted and walked out. I finished my breakfast and went upstairs. But I did not go to my room. I went to the laundry room. Miles had been wearing his tuxedo last night, and in his drunken state, he had thrown it on the floor of his dressing room. My job, usually, was to retrieve it and prepare it for the dry cleaners. I found the jacket in a pile. I checked the pockets habit. Really, to make sure he had not left a receipt or a lighter. My fingers brushed against cold metal. It was his keyring, not the car keys, but the small, intricate set he kept for his private study and the wall safe. He never left these out. He was paranoid about security. But fear and alcohol make people sloppy. I stood there in the laundry room, holding the keys, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I had a window. Cynthia was in the garden, supervising the landscapers. Miles was in the shower. I could hear the pipes rattling. I moved. I walked down the hall to his study, my bare feet silent on the hardwood. I unlocked the heavy oak door and slipped inside, closing it softly behind me. The room smelled of cedar and stale cigar smoke. I went straight to the painting of the hunt scene behind the desk and swung it open. The safe was there. I used the small brass key. It turned with a satisfying click. I pulled the heavy door open. Inside, there were stacks of cash, rubber banded in bundles of $100. There were velvet jewelry boxes, and there was a thick manila envelope, shoved to the back, labeled with 2 letters in black marker, K, G, my initials. I pulled it out. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. I undid the clasp and dumped the contents onto the desk. It was my life, or rather, the version of my life they had stolen. There was my Social Security card, the one they told me I had lost when I was 16. The one they said was too difficult to replace, which was why I could not get a proper job or apply for financial aid for college. It had been here the whole time. There was my birth certificate, but it was a copy, and it looked wrong. The paper was too new, and then there was a document I did not recognize. It looked like a ledger from a law firm. It was dated 27 years ago. It listed a series of payments. Monthly stipend for care and maintenance, $4,000. Adjustment for inflation, $5,500. Education trust, dispersed to guardian. I stared at the numbers. $4,000 a month. For 27 years. I did the math in my head. That was over $1 million. They had been paid to keep me. They had been paid to raise me. And yet, I was wearing secondhand clothes and sleeping in the smallest room in the house. There was one more paper. It was a photocopy of an old medical record from a hospital in Austin. The patient name was blacked out with heavy permanent marker, but the date matched my birthday. I pulled out my phone, my real phone, and snapped photos of everything. Then I shoved the papers back into the envelope, put it back in the safe, locked it, and hung the painting back up. I was back in the laundry room, pressing the keys back into Miles's tuxedo pocket, when I heard the shower turn off. I had just enough time to grab a basket of towels and look busy before Miles walked past the door, a towel wrapped around his waist. "Hey, kiddo," he said, giving me a thumbs up, keeping busy. "Good girl." I smiled at him. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. I spent the afternoon in a fog of rage. I wanted to scream. I wanted to burn the house down, but I had to be smart. I had the burner phone. I had the photos. At 4 p.m, my personal phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I did not have saved, but the context made it clear. Starbucks on Lemon Avenue. 45 minutes. Come alone. M. Maris. I told Cynthia I needed to go to the pharmacy to pick up some antacids for Miles. She let me go, but not before telling me to hurry back because she wanted to order Thai food for a family dinner. I drove to the coffee shop, checking my rearview mirror every 30 seconds to see if I was being followed. I felt like a spy in a bad movie, but the fear in my gut was very real. Maris was sitting in a booth in the back corner, wearing oversized sunglasses and a baseball cap. She looked less like a bride and more like a fugitive. She did not say hello. She just slid a laptop across the table toward me. "I have a friend in risk management at Chase Bank," she said, her voice low. I asked him to run a full credit check on everyone in the Graham household. I wanted to know what I was marrying into. She took a sip of her black coffee. I expected Colton to have some debt, maybe a car lease, maybe some student loans. But Kendall, look at the screen. I looked. The report was under my name, Kendall Graham, total outstanding debt, $245,000. I gasped, the sound sucking the air out of the booth. "What is this?" I whispered. "I do not have any credit cards. I do not have loans. I have $600 in a savings account." Maris pointed at the screen. "There is a small business loan taken out 5 years ago for $100,000. There is a home improvement loan for $80,000. There are 3 credit cards maxed out, all in your name, all co-signed or authorized by Miles Graham as your guardian or power of attorney." I felt sick, physically sick. The room started to spin. "They used me," I said, my voice trembling. "They used my credit score because theirs was probably trash." "Exactly," Maris said. "And because they told you that you had no documents, you never checked, you never froze your credit. You were the perfect ghost." She leaned forward, taking off her sunglasses, Her eyes were fierce. "Kendall, I signed a prenuptial agreement with Colton. My father's lawyers are sharks. There is a clause in there called the full disclosure of liabilities. It states that if any party has concealed significant financial burdens or legal entanglements, the marriage can be annulled, and all financial support from the Vale family will be terminated immediately." She tapped the table with a manicured fingernail. "This constitutes fraud. If my father sees this, he will not just cut them off, he will destroy them. And honestly, I am about 2 seconds away from showing it to him myself. I do not want to be married to a man whose family treats people like livestock." "Why are you helping me?" I asked. "You just got married yesterday. This blows up your life too." Maris looked out the window, watching the traffic on Lemon Avenue. "Because I saw my father's face last night," she said quietly. "He has been a hard man my whole life. Cold, distant. But when he looked at you, I saw a human being. And if you are who I think you are, then you are my sister. And Vales protect their own." My phone buzzed in my pocket. The burner phone. I pulled it out under the table. Maris watched me but did not ask. One new message from G. "The preliminary markers are a match. I am 99% sure. But there is something else. My investigators found the old accounts. It is not just DNA. It is theft. Come to my office tomorrow morning. Do not tell them." I looked up at Maris. "He knows," I said. Maris nodded grimly. "Then you need to go home and pack a bag. Tonight. Because once this breaks, that house is going to become a war zone." I drove back to Rosemont Heights as the sun was setting. The sky was a bruised purple, mirroring the feeling in my chest. I was not just a servant to them. I was a piggy bank. I was a scapegoat. I was a host body they were bleeding dry. I parked the car down the street, not wanting the engine noise to alert them. I walked up the driveway, the gravel crunching softly under my sneakers. The house was dark, except for a single light in the kitchen. I unlocked the front door quietly. I had become very good at being quiet over the years. I heard voices coming from the kitchen. It was Cynthia. She was on the phone. Her voice was a low, frantic whisper, but in the silence of the house. It carried, I know she was saying, but Gideon looked at her. I saw it. If he digs into the adoption records, if he finds out the agency never existed, pause. Miles must have been on the other end, or maybe the lawyer. We spent it. Miles. We spent the money. The trust is gone. The payment stopped 3 years ago. But we kept borrowing against her name. If she knows, if she finds out she owns this house, we are finished. I stood there in the hallway, my hand gripping the strap of my bag. If she finds out she owns this house. The words bounced around my skull like a bullet. They did not just steal from me. They bought this house with my money. The roof over my head, the roof they told me I should be grateful for, was paid for by the money my real father had sent to protect me. I was not the guest. I was the landlord. And they were the squatters. I backed away slowly, stepping out the front door and letting it click shut. I stood on the porch, the night air cool on my face. My heart was beating so hard it felt like a drum of war. I looked at the burner phone in my hand. I looked at the big, beautiful house that belonged to me. I am not leaving. I whispered to the darkness. I was going to stay, and I was going to take it all back. The offices of Mercer and Sloan were not designed for comfort. They were designed for intimidation. Located on the 42nd floor of a Glass Needle in downtown Dallas, the firm smelled of espresso, leather, and hourly rates that exceeded what I used to make in a year. This was not a place where families were reunited over weeping embraces and warm tea. This was a place where empires were divided, treaties were signed, and uncomfortable truths were bolted down with non-disclosure agreements. I sat in a chair that probably cost $5,000, my hands folded in my lap to hide the fact that they were shaking. Across the black marble conference table sat Gideon Vale. He looked different than he had at the rehearsal dinner or the wedding. The raw, emotional panic was gone, replaced by the cold, hard focus of a man who built skyscrapers for a living. Next to him was a lawyer introduced only as Mr. Sterling, a man with a face as sharp and blank as a sheet of fresh printer paper. There was no small talk. Mr. Sterling opened a leather folder and slid a single document across the polished stone surface toward me. It was not a long document. It was a DNA analysis report from a private genetic laboratory in Houston. I did not need to read the technical jargon about alleles and markers. I only needed to read the summary at the bottom. Probability of paternity 99.9%. I stared at the number. It was just ink on paper, but it felt like a grenade that had just detonated in the center of my life. The noise in my head was deafening, a rushing sound of 27 years of lies collapsing all at once. I looked up at Gideon. He was watching me, his hands clasped tightly in front of him, his knuckles white. "It is conclusive," Gideon said, his voice steady but low. "You are my daughter. Kendall, you are Evelyn's daughter." I felt a strange sensation, like I was floating out of my body. I should have felt joy. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt a cold, jagged fury. Why, I asked. The word came out like a croak. Gideon winced. He looked at the lawyer, then back at me. "Evelyn left because my father gave her a choice," Gideon said. "Take the money and leave, or stay and watch me be disinherited and destroyed. She chose to save me. I was told she terminated the pregnancy. I was told she moved to Europe." He took a breath, and for a second, the billionaire mask slipped. I believed them because I wanted to believe them. It was easier to think she sold out than to think I had failed her. But when you were born, my father knew. The Vales have eyes everywhere. He could not risk a scandal, an illegitimate child. In 1996, it would have ruined his political ambitions, so he fixed it. I said, my voice hardening. "He fixed it," Gideon admitted. "He arranged for a private placement, a quiet adoption with a respectable family who needed financial assistance, the Grahams." He gestured to Mr. Sterling. The lawyer opened a second file, much thicker than the first. He began to lay out documents on the table, one by one, like tarot cards predicting a disaster. "We uncovered the existence of the Gemini Trust," Mr. Sterling said, his voice dry and professional. "It was established by your grandfather to ensure your care without ever legally acknowledging you. It was designed to be anonymous. A monthly stipend was wired to Miles and Cynthia Graham for your education, health care, and general welfare. How much, I asked. $4,000 a month for the first 10 years. Mr. Sterling read from the ledger, increasing to $6,000 a month until your 18th birthday, plus a lump sum of $200,000 for college tuition disbursed when you turned 18. My head spun. I did the math quickly. That was over $1 million. I looked at the clothes I was wearing, bargain rack slacks, and a blouse I had bought at a thrift store. I thought about the car I drove, a 15-year-old sedan with a broken air conditioner. I thought about the nights I had eaten leftovers while Colton ordered steak. They told me I was a charity case. I whispered. They told me I was lucky they did not throw me out. They were employees. "Kendall," Gideon said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. "They were paid handsomely to raise you, and instead Mr. Sterling flipped a page. We have audited the flow of funds. The money from the trust did not go to your savings. It did not go to your college fund." He pointed to a column of figures. April 2005. A transfer of $8,000. The same week Miles Graham purchased a boat. August 2012. A transfer of $15,000. The same month they remodeled the master bath. And here the college fund. $200,000. It was withdrawn in full the week Colton was accepted into Southern Methodist University. I felt like I was going to be sick. Colton's education, the education he bragged about, the education they told me I was too stupid to appreciate, it was paid for with my money. But that is not the worst of it, Gideon said. "Show her the credit report." Mr. Sterling slid another stack of papers across the table. It was the detailed version of what Maris had shown me, but with forensic annotations. "Miles Graham has been using your Social Security number as a dump site for toxic debt for 5 years, Sterling explained. "He takes out loans in your name to cover the interest on his own business debts. He uses your identity to show liquidity to his investors. Essentially, he keeps his own credit score pristine by ruining yours. If you tried to rent an apartment today, you would be rejected. If you tried to buy a car, you would be laughed out of the dealership. This is fraud. I said, this is prison time. Federal prison time. Sterling corrected. Wire fraud, identity theft, embezzlement. Gideon leaned forward. His gray eyes were pleading. Kendall, you cannot go back there. It is not safe. I have arranged an apartment for you at the St. Regis. I have a security team ready to move you. We will file the paperwork tomorrow. We will freeze their assets. We will crush them. He reached a hand across the table. Palm up. Let me take care of you. Let me be the father I should have been. I looked at his hand. It was manicured, powerful, safe. It was the hand that could wave a magic wand and make all my problems disappear. But I did not take it. I looked up at his face. If you are my father, I asked quietly, why did I grow up as a servant? The room went silent. The hum of the air conditioning seemed to get louder. Gideon froze. I know you sent money, I continued, my voice trembling. I know you thought I was adopted, but you are Gideon Vale. You own half of Texas. You have investigators who can find a needle in a haystack. In 27 years, did you never once check on me? Did you never once drive by the house? Did you never once look at a photo to see if I was happy? Gideon's face crumpled. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He closed it again. He looked down at the table, unable to meet my eyes. I did not know. He whispered, I was a coward. I was afraid that if I saw you, I would have to admit what I had lost. That is not an answer. I said, that is an excuse. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the marble floor. I am not going to the St. Regis, Gideon, and I am not letting you sweep this under the rug with lawyers and security teams. Kendall, please, Gideon said, standing up too. You do not understand what these people are capable of. Miles is cornered. I understand perfectly. I said, for 27 years. They made me believe I was nothing. They made me believe I owed them my life. If we arrest them now, if we just send the police, they will play the victim. They will say it was a misunderstanding. They will say I was unstable. They will spin it. I looked at the documents on the table, the evidence of my stolen life. I do not want them in jail yet. I said, I want them to destroy themselves. I want them to lie on the record. I want them to admit what they did in front of the people they are trying so hard to impress. Sterling looked at me with a flicker of interest. What are you proposing? Ms. Graham? Ms. Vale, Gideon corrected automatically. I ignored him. There is a family meeting tomorrow. Isn't there, I asked? The one where you are supposed to discuss Colton's future in your company? Gideon nodded. Yes, Miles has been begging for it. He thinks we are going to announce Colton's executive vice presidency. Good, I said. Let them think that. Let them come. Let them bring their smiles and their lies. And I will be there too. I am not sure that is wise. Sterling began. It is the only way, I interrupted. If you sue them, they will fight. If I confront them in private, they will gaslight me. But if we do it there, if we trap them in their own greed, I looked at Gideon. You want to make it right? You want to help me? Then help me set the stage. Do not tell them you know. Do not tell Colton. Play the part of the happy father-in-law one last time. Gideon looked at me. He saw the anger in my eyes, the steel that had been forged in the fires of the Graham household. He saw his own stubbornness reflected back at him. He slowly sat back down. He picked up the DNA test and folded it. Okay, he said softly. We do it your way. He looked at Sterling. Prepare the forensic accounting for a presentation. I want every stolen dime highlighted. I want the car payments, the tuition, the jewelry. I want it all ready to be projected on a screen. Yes, sir, Sterling said. Gideon turned back to me. But after this, after we expose them, you have to let me help you. You have to let me claim you. I did not promise anything. I buttoned my cheap jacket and picked up my bag. We will see, I said. I walked to the door, my hand on the handle. Kendall, Gideon called out. I stopped. I want to publicly acknowledge you as my daughter, he said. his voice thick with emotion. "I want to do it right here, amidst this wedding." I looked back at him. "The wedding is over." "Gideon," I said, "now comes the divorce. The transformation from victim to hunter is not loud. It does not happen with a scream or an explosion. It happens in silence. It happens in the quiet moments when you stop asking why and start asking how." For the next 48 hours, I moved through the Graham household like a sleeper agent. I did the laundry. I made the coffee. I listened to Miles rant about the stock market and Cynthia complain about the humidity. To them, I was the same Kendall they had beaten into submission for 27 years. I was the furniture, but inside, I was building a bomb. The first step was reclaiming my identity on paper. I could not walk into a bank branch. Miles tracked the GPS on my car. A little feature he claimed was for my safety but was actually for his control. So I did it on my phone, hiding in the bathroom with the shower running. I used the photos of the documents I had stolen from the safe. I opened a high-yield savings account at a bank Miles did not use. I set up a secure email address with two-factor authentication linked to the burner phone. It felt terrifying. Typing my own social security number, the one they told me was lost, the one they told me was invalid, felt like cracking a code. When the screen flashed identity verified, I sat on the edge of the bathtub and shook. I existed. I was real. And for the first time in my life, I had a secret that they did not own. Maris was my handler. She messaged me on the burner phone. Short, encrypted bursts of strategy. "Gideon is setting the stage," she wrote. "Wednesday night, the villa, dinner. He is going to invite them to discuss Colton's future with the Vale Meridian Group. He is going to dangle the carrot so high they will not look down at the trap." I texted back, "What do I do?" "You come," she replied, "but not as the help. You come as family. Wear something that scares them." I deleted the messages immediately. The invitation arrived the next morning. It came via courier, a heavy cream-colored envelope addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Graham and family. Cynthia opened it at the breakfast table. Her hands were trembling, but this time it was with excitement. "Oh, Miles, look!" she shrieked, clutching the card to her chest. "Gideon is inviting us to the private villa. This is it. This is the inner circle. He wants to discuss bringing Colton on board as a vice president." Miles grabbed the card, his face flushing with greed. "I told you, Cynthia. I told you the wedding was just the start. We are in. We are finally in." He looked over at Colton, who was eating a bagel with the indifference of a prince who assumes the kingdom is his birthright. "You need to be sharp, son," Miles said, pointing a sausage-like finger. "Gideon Vale does not suffer fools. This is a business meeting disguised as dinner. You need to know the numbers." Colton shrugged. "I am ready, Dad. Maris says the old man likes me. I just have to charm him." Then Miles looked at me. The joy vanished from his face, replaced by the familiar sneer. "The invitation says family," he grumbled. "That means we have to bring her." Cynthia looked at me as if I were a stain on the tablecloth. "Well, we cannot leave her here," she said. "It would look odd. Gideon asked about her at the wedding. If she is not there, he might think we are hiding her." "We are hiding her," Miles muttered. He turned to me. "Listen to me. Kendall, you are going to come. You are going to sit there. You are going to smile. And you are going to speak only when spoken to. You are not going to mention the glass breaking. You are not going to mention anything about the past. You are just there to look like the happy, grateful daughter we raised." "Do you understand?" I looked him in the eye. "I used to look at the floor." "Yes, Miles," I said. "I understand perfectly." "Good," he said, turning back to his coffee. "Wear that navy dress, the one with the high collar. Look modest." I went back to my chores, but my mind was racing. I needed more. The DNA was the key, and the bank records were the weapon. But I needed the smoking gun that tied them all together. I needed to prove intent. The opportunity came that afternoon. Colton went to the gym. Miles went to play golf. Cynthia was taking a nap. I went into Colton's room. It was a mess of expensive clothes and gaming equipment. I sat down at his desk. I knew his password because I was the one who set up his computer for him. Touchdown 12. He was not a complex man. I logged in and went straight to his email. Nothing there except receipts for sneakers and fantasy football leagues. I checked his deleted folder. Nothing. Then I saw his iPad sitting on the nightstand. I picked it up. It was synced to his phone messages. I scrolled back. I scrolled past the texts with his friends, past the texts with Maris. I found a thread with Cynthia from 3 months ago. My heart stopped. Colton. The bank called again about the overdue payment on the remodeling loan. They are asking for Kendall to authorize the refinance. Cynthia. Do not worry. Dad handled it. He signed for her. Colton. Is that safe? What if she checks her credit score? Cynthia. She does not know how to check her credit score. We have the documents locked in the safe. Just make sure you do not leave any of the collection notices on the counter. Don't let Kendall see the copy. Colton. Okay. Just don't want it to mess up my approval for the new Range Rover. I stared at the screen, tears pricking my eyes. It wasn't just Miles and Cynthia. Colton knew. My brother. The boy I had cooked for. The boy I had tutored. The boy I had protected from Miles's temper. He knew. He knew I was drowning in debt so he could drive a Range Rover. He knew they were forging my signature. He wasn't just a beneficiary of their cruelty. He was an accomplice. I took a screenshot of the thread and emailed it to my new secure account. Then I deleted the screenshot from the iPad. I walked out of his room. The last shred of guilt I had felt about destroying this family evaporated. They were not a family. They were a cartel, and I was the snitch. That evening, Maris came over for dinner. It was a casual drop-in, or so she made it seem. She brought a bottle of wine and sat on the patio with Colton and his parents. I was serving drinks, playing the part. Maris looked stunning, but her eyes were cold steel. She watched me pour the wine, her gaze lingering on my hands for a second. A silent check-in. Are you okay? I gave a microscopic nod. So, Colton, Maris said, leaning back in her chair and swirling her glass. My father is really excited about tomorrow. He wants to make sure everything is transparent before you join the board. The Vale Group has very strict compliance rules. Colton laughed. Confident and clueless, I have nothing to hide. Babe, my record is clean. Maris smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. That is good, she said, because the auditors go deep. They check everything. Family assets, liabilities, even sibling finances. Sometimes, to make sure there is no leverage risk. I saw Miles stiffen. He took a large gulp of his scotch. Why would they check Kendall? Miles asked, his voice a little too loud. She is independent. Well, sort of. She has her own life. Colton jumped in, smooth as silk. Yeah, Kendall does her own thing. We don't really mix our finances. She's pretty frugal. Actually. Right. Ken. He looked at me, expecting me to nod, to validate his lie. I looked at him. I saw the Range Rover in the driveway. I saw the watch on his wrist that cost more than I had earned in 5 years. Right. Colton, I said, my voice steady. I am very careful with my money. Maris watched him. She was giving him a chance to be honest, a chance to say, actually, there is a complicated situation with my sister. But he didn't. He just smiled that winning, empty smile. That is my girl, he said. Maris set her glass down. The sound of the glass hitting the table was sharp. Great, she said. Then tomorrow should be a breeze. Later that night, the house was quiet. I was in my room, sitting on the floor with my dossier. It wasn't a physical folder that was too risky. It was a mental map of everything I had gathered. The DNA test, the trust fund ledger, the credit report, the text messages. I was rehearsing what I would say. I was rehearsing the moment I would look Miles Graham in the face and tell him that his reign of terror was over. I heard the floorboards creak outside my door. It was a specific creak, the one on the third plank from the left. I knew the sound of this house better than I knew the sound of my own voice. I quickly turned off the lamp and slid under the covers, turning my back to the door. I slowed my breathing, feigning deep sleep. The door handle turned slowly. A wedge of light from the hallway cut across the floor. I smelled her perfume first. Chanel No. 5, heavy and floral. Cynthia stepped into the room. She did not turn on the light. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, just watching me. I could feel her eyes on my back. It was a predatory gaze, assessing, calculating. She moved further into the room. I heard the soft rustle of fabric. She was looking around. She opened my closet door quietly. She checked the top of my dresser. She was looking for something. Maybe the burner phone. Maybe the documents she thought I might have found. Maybe just a sign of rebellion. She found nothing. My room was as sterile as she required it to be. She walked to the side of the bed. She stood directly over me. I focused on keeping my eyelids relaxed, my breathing rhythmic. In, out, in, out. I heard her sigh. It was a sound of relief. She thinks we are stupid, she whispered. She wasn't talking to me. She was talking to herself. Or perhaps to the ghost of the problem she thought she had solved. She leaned down. Her face was close to my ear. I could feel the heat of her breath. If she opens her mouth tomorrow, she hissed, barely audible. We will tell them she is off her meds. We will tell them she is paranoid. Who are they going to believe, the vice president or the maid? She straightened up. Sleep tight. Kendall. She turned and walked out, closing the door softly behind her. I lay there in the darkness, my eyes wide open. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. They were going to gaslight me. They were going to paint me as crazy. It was their fail-safe. If the truth came out, they would destroy my credibility. They would use my trauma against me. I sat up in bed. I reached under the mattress and pulled out the burner phone. I typed a message to Gideon. They are planning to say I am insane if I speak up. They are going to use my history against me. A minute later, the reply came. Let them try. Facts do not care about their stories. Bring the dress. We are ready. I put the phone away. Cynthia was right about one thing. Someone was going to be destroyed tomorrow. She just had the wrong target. I got out of bed and walked to the window. I looked out at the driveway, where the moonlight reflected off the hood of Colton's car. I wasn't the maid anymore. I was the eviction notice. And tomorrow, I was going to serve it in person. The library in Gideon Vale's private villa was not designed for casual conversation. It was a room built for verdicts. The walls were lined with books that smelled of dust and history, and the windows were draped in heavy velvet that shut out the rest of the world. In the center of the room sat a long mahogany table, polished to a mirror shine, and around it sat the people who held the keys to my past and the shovel for my future. I walked in behind Miles and Cynthia, wearing the navy dress they had approved. It was modest, high-necked, the kind of thing a dutiful daughter wears to church. But under the table, my hands were clenched into fists, not in prayer, but in preparation. Miles was already beaming, his chest puffed out like a rooster who had just greeted the dawn. He shook Gideon's hand with a vigor that bordered on desperate. Gideon. Miles boomed, his voice echoing slightly in the large room. What a place. Truly magnificent. We are honored to be here. This is the next step. Right. For Colton. For the family. Gideon did not smile. He stood at the head of the table, looking like a judge in a bespoke suit. Please, sit down, Gideon said. Miles and Cynthia took the seats on the left. I sat next to Cynthia, instinctively making myself small. Opposite us were three strangers. One was Mr. Sterling, the lawyer I had met the day before. Next to him was a woman with sharp glasses and a laptop, whom Gideon introduced as Ms. Halloway, a forensic accountant, and at the end of the table sat a man who did not give his name, but whose card on the table read Civil Investigations and Asset Recovery. Cynthia's smile faltered. She looked at the strangers, then at Gideon. Oh, she said, a nervous laugh bubbling up. I thought this was a dinner. Are we signing contracts tonight? In a manner of speaking. Gideon said. He sat down. The room went dead silent. We are here to discuss the integration of the Graham and Vale families, Gideon began. his voice smooth but devoid of warmth. Before we can move forward with Colton's appointment as vice president, my team needs to clear up a few administrative discrepancies. Standard due diligence. Miles relaxed. Of course. Paperwork. The bane of business. Right, fire away. Gideon, we are an open book. Gideon nodded to Mr. Sterling. The lawyer opened a file. We have been reviewing the background checks for all immediate family members. Sterling said, we have hit a snag regarding Kendall's legal status. Miles waved a hand dismissively. Oh, Kendall, well, she is adopted. It was a private arrangement years ago. Very informal. We took her in when no one else would. Right, Gideon said. He leaned forward, his gray eyes locking onto Miles. That is the part I am struggling with. The adoption papers. Where are they? Miles froze. Just for a second. They are well. They are in our safe. He lied. We can get copies. It has been 27 years. Gideon, some paperwork gets misplaced. Sterling slid a piece of paper across the table. We checked with the state. Sterling said, there is no record of an adoption. There is no decree. There is no name change order. Legally, Kendall has no guardian. Cynthia jumped in, her voice high and tight. Well, it was a guardianship, a permanent guardianship. We handled it through a private attorney who has since passed away. We raised her like our own. That is what matters. Isn't it? Gideon did not answer her. He looked at Ms. Holloway. Show them the ledger, Gideon commanded. The accountant typed something on her laptop, and a large monitor on the wall flickered to life. It displayed a spreadsheet. It was colorful, detailed, and devastating. This is the transaction history for the Gemini Trust. Ms. Holloway said. Her voice was monotone, which made the words sound even more lethal. A blind trust established 27 years ago to provide for the care and maintenance of the child known as Kendall. I heard Cynthia suck in a breath. It sounded like a tire being punctured. The trust disbursed $4,000 a month initially, adjusting for inflation to nearly $6,000. Holloway continued. The funds were wired to a joint account held by Miles and Cynthia Graham. She pressed a key. The screen changed. This chart tracks the outflow of those funds. I watched the screen. I saw the dates. I saw the amounts. August 2005. Holloway read, $8,000 wired from the trust. 3 days later, a payment of $8,000 was made to Dallas Marine for a 20-foot recreational boat. Miles shifted in his seat. That is a coincidence. I work hard. I bought that boat with my bonus. October 2010. Holloway went on. Ignoring him, $12,000 wired. 2 days later, a payment to Luxury Landscapes for a backyard renovation. And here, she pointed to a large red bar on the chart. June of last year. $50,000 withdrawn from the accumulated interest. The same week, a payment was made to Tiffany & Company for a 3-carat diamond engagement ring. The room went so quiet, I could hear the hum of the hard drive in the laptop. I looked at the ring on the screen. Then I looked at the ring on my brother's fiancé's finger. My sister's finger. Maris wasn't in the room yet, but I knew that ring. I had polished it. You bought Maris's ring with my food money. I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the silence like a razor. Cynthia turned on me, her eyes wide and panicked. Kendall, shut up. You do not understand finances. We pooled our resources. We fed you. We clothed you. That money was reimbursement for the burden of raising you. Reimbursement, Gideon repeated, the word dripping with ice. He stood up and walked to the screen. You received over $1 million intended for her education and her future. And yet, she has no college degree because you told her there was no money. She drives a car that is barely road legal. She works as your maid. That is not true, Miles shouted, slamming his hand on the table. He was sweating now, big oily drops rolling down his forehead. She lives in our house. She eats our food. We gave her a home. You gave me a cell. I said. I stood up. My legs were shaking. But my voice was steady, and it wasn't just the trust money. Was it, Miles? I looked at the civil investigator. He slid a stack of papers toward Miles. "We found the loans," the investigator said. 3 credit cards, a small business loan for a shell company called Graham Consulting, a refinancing of your home mortgage, all co-signed by Kendall Graham. "I never signed those," I said, looking Miles dead in the eye. "You forged my signature." I continued. "You used my credit score to prop up your failing business. You buried me in debt so deep I would never be able to leave. That is why you kept me, isn't it? I wasn't a daughter, I was a co-signer." Miles's face turned a violent shade of purple. "You ungrateful little wretch," he hissed. "You would be on the street if it weren't for us. You think you are smart? You think anyone is going to believe you? You have a history of instability. We have doctors who will testify." "That is enough," Gideon roared. The sound of his voice made Cynthia jump. Just then, the heavy double doors opened. Colton walked in. He was grinning, holding a glass of scotch, completely oblivious to the massacre that was happening in the library. He had been kept in the other room, likely by Maris, waiting for his big entrance. "Hey," Colton said, strutting in. "Sorry I'm late. Had to take a call. So, are we celebrating? Is the VP spot official?" He stopped. He saw Miles sweating. He saw Cynthia looking like she was about to vomit. He saw me standing up. "What is going on?" Colton asked, his smile fading. "Why does everyone look so serious?" "Sit down. Colton," Gideon said. Colton hesitated, then pulled out a chair next to his father. "Dad, what is happening?" "Your sister was just explaining how she unknowingly financed your lifestyle." Gideon said. Colton looked at me, then at the screen, then at his parents. He laughed, a nervous, jerky sound. "Kendall financing me. That is a joke, right? She barely makes minimum wage. She helps out around the house because she likes it. She volunteered. Right, Ken." He looked at me with that pleading, charming look he always used, the look that said, "Cover for me, and I will be nice to you later." I didn't say anything. I just stared at him. "She volunteered," Colton repeated, looking at Gideon. "She loves us. She wanted to contribute." The doors opened again. Maris walked in. She was not wearing a wedding dress today. She was wearing a sharp black suit. She held a piece of paper in her hand. She did not look at Colton. She walked straight to the table and placed the paper in front of him. "Explain this." "Colton," she said. Colton looked at the paper. It was a printout of an email. What is this?" he stammered. "It is an email you sent to your mother 3 months ago." Maris said, her voice calm and terrifying. She read it out loud. "From memory. Make sure Kendall does not see the mail. If she finds out about the refinancing, she might panic. We need to keep her confused and grateful until after the wedding. Once the veil money hits, we can pay off her debt and she will never know." Maris looked at him. "You knew," she said. "You knew they were stealing her identity. You knew they were ruining her credit, and your only concern was making sure the checks cleared so you could get your Range Rover." Colton turned pale. "Maris, babe, listen, it is not what it looks like. I was just trying to protect her. I didn't want her to worry." "Stop," Maris said. She took the ring off her finger, the 3-carat diamond paid for by the Gemini Trust, and dropped it on the mahogany table. It made a heavy, final sound. "It is over. Colton, the marriage, the job, the merger, all of it." Miles stood up so fast his chair tipped over backward. "This is a setup," he screamed, pointing a shaking finger at Gideon. "You lured us here. You cannot do this. I will sue you. I will sue you for defamation. I will drag your name through the mud." He looked at me, his eyes bulging. "And you? You little snake. You think you can destroy this family. After everything we did for you, you are nothing. You are nobody." He lunged toward me. His hand raised. The investigator moved faster than I could blink. He stepped between us, blocking Miles with a wall of muscle. "Sit down. Mr. Graham," the investigator said calmly. Miles backed off, panting. "We are leaving. Cynthia, Colton, get up. We are leaving." He started to gather his things, his hands shaking violently. "You can go," Gideon said quietly. Gideon picked up a thick file from the table. It was bound in red. "But this file stays here, and tomorrow morning, it goes to the district attorney." Miles stopped. He looked at the file. "What is that?" he whispered. "Evidence," Gideon said, "of 20 counts of wire fraud, 10 counts of identity theft, forgery, embezzlement, and tax evasion because I am guessing you didn't declare that trust money to the IRS. Did you?" Miles went white. Gideon walked around the table until he was standing right in front of Miles. "You have 2 choices. Miles, you can walk out of here, and my lawyers will have you arrested before you reach the highway. Or you can sit down, sign the confession we have prepared, and surrender every asset you purchased with stolen funds. You will leave this state. You will never speak to Kendall again, and you will pray that I am merciful enough to only leave you with the clothes on your back." Miles looked at Cynthia. She was sobbing now, her face buried in her hands. "We had an agreement." Cynthia wailed suddenly, her voice high and broken. Everyone looked at her. "What did you say?" Gideon asked. Cynthia looked up, her mascara running down her cheeks. "We had an agreement," she cried, looking at Gideon. "With your father? With the old man. He said if we took her, if we kept her quiet, if we made sure she never knew who she was, that we could keep the surplus. He said the money was ours as long as she stayed a gram." The room went dead silent. Cynthia realized what she had said. She clamped her hand over her mouth, her eyes widening in horror. Miles closed his eyes. He knew it was over. "So it wasn't just theft," Gideon said, his voice shaking with a mix of grief and rage. "It was a contract. You were paid to erase my daughter." He looked at me. Kendall watched them. I watched the people who had raised me, the people I had feared, the people I had served, and I saw them for what they were. They weren't powerful. They were just greedy. Small people who had sold a child for a boat and a ring. I walked over to the table. I picked up the paper Maris had dropped the email printout. I looked at Colton. He was slumped in his chair, head in his hands. I looked at Miles. He was staring at the floor, defeated. I looked at Cynthia. She was still crying, muttering about the agreement. I turned to Gideon. "Do not let them leave," I said. Gideon looked at me. "Call the police." I said, "I do not want their confession. I want them in handcuffs, because a confession is just words, and I was done with words. I wanted justice." The drive back to the Graham house after the confrontation at the villa was the longest 40 minutes of my life. Silence usually feels empty, but in that car, it felt heavy, like the air before a tornado touches down. Miles drove with a white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel, his eyes fixed on the road, while Cynthia wept softly in the passenger seat. A sound that grated on my nerves like sandpaper. I sat in the back, not as a passenger, but as a prisoner who had just taken over the prison. When we walked into the house bought with my trust fund, the house renovated with my identity, the atmosphere shifted instantly. The desperation that had paralyzed them in Gideon's library mutated into something sharper, something uglier. Miles did not go for the scotch. He went for the jugular. He cornered me in the kitchen before I could reach the stairs. He blocked the doorway with his bulk, his face a mask of sweating, red-faced intensity. "Listen to me. Kendall," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that made my skin crawl. "We need to be practical here. Gideon is emotional right now. He is throwing around threats, but he is a businessman. He does not want a scandal any more than we do." He took a step closer, and I smelled the stale fear on him. "We can fix this," he said. "If you keep your mouth shut, if you tell them you were confused, that you signed those papers willingly. Look, the house has equity, a lot of equity. We can sell it. We can split it. You could walk away with $50,000, maybe 60. That is a lot of money for a girl like you." I stared at him. He was trying to bribe me with a fraction of my own money. He was trying to buy my silence with the scraps of the fortune he had stolen. "And if I don't?" I asked, my voice flat. Cynthia stepped up beside him. Her tears had dried. leaving streaks of mascara like war paint. Her eyes were hard. "Then where will you go?" she asked, her voice dripping with the old venom. "You think Gideon Vale is going to play daddy forever? He is guilty too. Kendall, he abandoned you. Once the novelty wears off, he will toss you aside just like his father did to your mother, and you will have burned your only bridge. You will be homeless. You will be nothing." It was a masterclass in manipulation, the carrot and the stick, the promise of cash and the threat of oblivion. A week ago, it might have worked. A week ago, the terror of being alone might have silenced me. But they had made a fatal error. They had let me see the ledger. They had let me see the math of my own worth. I am already homeless. "Cynthia," I said quietly, "I have been living in a stranger's house for 27 years. I pushed past them. Miles reached out as if to grab me, but his hand hovered and dropped. He knew the rules had changed. He knew that if he touched me now, he wasn't disciplining a ward. He was assaulting a Vale. I went upstairs. But I did not go to my room. I went to the attic. For years, I had been forbidden from entering the attic. Too much dust. Kendall. You will make a mess. Kendall. Now I knew why. It wasn't about the dust. It was about the archives. I pulled the string for the light and climbed the creaking stairs. The air up there was hot and dry, smelling of insulation and secrets. I began to dig. I ignored the boxes of Colton's old trophies and Cynthia's seasonal decorations. I found what I was looking for tucked behind a stack of old tax returns, a shoebox wrapped in packing tape. I cut it open with my house keys. Inside, there were no jewels or cash. It was just paper, old letters, receipts, and photographs. I picked up a photo. It was a Polaroid, the colors shifting toward orange with age. It showed a baby, maybe 3 months old, sleeping in a crib that looked far too expensive for the Graham's early years. I turned it over. On the back, in Cynthia's handwriting, were 3 words that stole the breath from my lungs. The Vale asset, not Kendall, not baby, asset. I wasn't a child to them. I was an investment vehicle. I was a bond that matured over 18 years. They hadn't just stolen from me. They had dehumanized me before I could even speak. I put the photo in my pocket. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so pure it felt like clarity. My phone buzzed. It was Gideon. "I need to see you. Please, I am outside." I walked out of the house, ignoring Miles calling my name from the living room. I walked down the long driveway to where a black sedan was idling in the shadows of the oak trees. Gideon was standing by the car. He looked exhausted. The titan of industry looked like a man who had been hollowed out. He didn't offer me a ride to a hotel. He didn't try to whisk me away. He just handed me an envelope. "It is from Evelyn," he said, his voice rough. My lawyers found it in the archives of my father's estate. It was intercepted 27 years ago. I never saw it. I took the envelope. The paper was brittle. I opened it under the street lamp. The handwriting was looped and artistic. The hand of a musician. It was a letter begging for news. Begging to know if the baby was safe. Begging for a chance to explain. But it was the postscript that broke me. "Gideon, I know your father will not let me keep her. I know he has the power to erase us. But if our daughter grows up without a mother, please, I beg you, let someone call her by her right name. Do not let her be a ghost." I lowered the letter. Tears were streaming down my face, hot and fast. Do not let her be a ghost. I had spent my entire life feeling like a phantom in my own home. I had spent 27 years being erased, and my mother, from across the decades, had known. She had predicted the exact shape of my pain. I looked up at Gideon. He was crying too. Silent tears that tracked through the stubble on his cheeks. "Why are you doing this now?" I asked. My voice cracking. He looked at me, confused. "What do you mean, the investigation, the confrontation, the DNA? Are you doing this to save me? Or are you doing it to wash the blood off your own hands?" Gideon flinched. He looked away, staring into the darkness of the suburban street. He stayed silent for a long time. When he looked back, his eyes were clear, both. He admitted. It was the first honest thing anyone had said to me in days. I was a coward. Kendall. I let my father handle it because I was afraid of losing my inheritance. I traded you for a skyline, and every time I looked at Maris, I felt a hole in my chest where you should have been. I am doing this because I hate myself, and saving you is the only way I can think of to start paying the debt. He took a step toward me, but stopped, respecting the distance I had set. I cannot change the last 27 years, he said, but I can make sure the next 27 are yours. I looked at him. I saw the guilt eating him alive. It didn't fix the past. It didn't give me back my childhood. But it was a start. I kept the letter. I am not ready to call you Dad. I said, I know, Gideon said, but I am ready to stop being a ghost. I turned and walked back toward the house. The wedding, or what was supposed to be the wedding, was scheduled for the next day. The cancellation hadn't been announced yet. Maris was handling it with the precision of a surgeon. She met me early the next morning at a coffee shop 3 towns over. She looked tired but resolved. I am canceling the vendors at the last minute, she said. I want them to show up. I want the guests to show up. Why, I asked. Why not just send an email? Because if I send an email, Colton will spin it, Maris said. He will tell everyone we grew apart. He will tell everyone it was mutual. He will keep his dignity. And worst of all, he will blame you. He will say his crazy sister caused stress that broke us up. She leaned across the table. I want him to stand there in his tuxedo and watch his life fall apart. I want the world to know why. I want them to know he's a fraud. So we go through with the ceremony, I asked. No, she said. We go through with the reception, the speeches. That is where the microphone is. She looked at me. I am going to give a speech. Kendall, about why I cannot marry him. But I think you should speak too. Me, I asked. I am the maid of honor who wasn't invited. Exactly, Maris said. You are the witness. You are the evidence. The idea terrified me. Public speaking was for people who mattered, people like Colton, people like Gideon. I was the girl who hid in the kitchen. But then I touched the pocket where I kept Evelyn's letter. Let someone call her by her right name. I will do it, I said. I went home to get ready. The house was a flurry of manic energy. Miles and Cynthia were in denial. They were getting dressed, barking orders, pretending the meeting at the villa had never happened. They were convinced they could smooth it over. Fake it until you make it. That was the Graham family motto. I was in my room, staring at the dress Maris had sent me. It wasn't a bridesmaid dress. It was a couture gown, deep emerald green, structured and elegant. It was a power suit disguised as evening wear. There was a knock on the door. Kendall. It was Colton. He didn't wait for an answer. He pushed the door open. He was already in his tuxedo, looking every inch the golden boy. But his eyes were frantic. He closed the door behind him and leaned against it, running a hand through his perfect hair. Hey, sis, he said. My stomach turned. He hadn't called me sis since we were 6 years old. What do you want, Colton? I asked, not turning away from the mirror. Look, I know things are tense, he said, walking toward me. Mom and Dad, they are losing it, and Gideon is on a warpath. But you and me, we have always been cool, right? He reached out and touched my shoulder. I flinched, stepping away. We were a team. Kenny, he said, using a nickname I hated. Remember when I taught you how to ride a bike? Remember when I snuck you that pizza when Mom put you on a diet? I remembered. I also remembered him blaming me for the broken vase. I remembered him laughing when his friends made fun of my clothes. What do you want? I repeated. He let out a breath. Dropping the act for a second, I need you to talk to Gideon, he said, his voice desperate. He listens to you. Tell him I didn't know. Tell him I thought the money was legit. Tell him I was a victim too. He grabbed my hands. His palms were sweaty. If I lose this job, Kendall, I am done. I have debts. I have people coming after me. I need this merger. Just tell him to leave me out of the lawsuit. Please, save me. Sis, do it for the family. I looked down at his hands gripping mine. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He wasn't apologizing for the stolen credit or the years of neglect. He was asking me to be his shield one last time. He wanted me to absorb the blow so he could keep driving his Range Rover. He didn't see me. He saw an escape hatch. I pulled my hands away. I wiped them on my jeans as if he had left a stain. "I cannot save you, Colton," I said. His face hardened. The charm evaporated, replaced by the petulant anger of a spoiled child. "You owe me," he snapped. "We took you in. We fed you." I walked to the closet and took out the green dress. "You didn't feed me." "Colton," I said, turning back to him. "I bought the food. I bought the table. I bought the roof. You were just the guest who overstayed his welcome. Get out of my room." He stared at me, shocked by the steel in my voice. He opened his mouth to scream, to bully, to threaten. But he saw something in my eyes that stopped him. He saw the end. He turned and slammed the door as he left. I stood there in the silence. My heart was pounding, but it was a good rhythm. Strong, steady. I took off the jeans and the t-shirt, the uniform of Kendall the servant. I put on the green dress. It fit perfectly. It didn't hide me. It announced me. I looked in the mirror. I didn't see the frightened girl with the messy bun. I saw Evelyn's daughter. I saw Gideon's blood. I saw the woman who had survived 27 years of erasure and learned how to write her own name in the dark. I picked up the clutch bag Maris had given me. Inside was the phone with the evidence, the letter from my mother, and the speech I had written on the back of a napkin. I wasn't going to the wedding to watch. I wasn't going to the wedding to serve. I walked to the door and whispered to the empty room, a promise to the girl I used to be. Today, I am not the background. Today, I am the main event. The champagne glasses were already filled, bubbles rising in golden streams that caught the light of the crystal chandeliers. The ballroom of the Marlowe Grand Hotel was a sea of anticipation. This was the moment the guests had been waiting for: the speeches, the toasts, the public cementing of the alliance between the Grahams and the Vales. I sat at a table near the back, not hiding, but waiting. I was wearing the emerald green dress Maris had chosen for me, a color that stood out sharply against the sea of black tuxedos and pastel gowns. My hands rested in my lap, no longer shaking. I felt a strange, cold calm, like the eye of a hurricane. Miles and Cynthia were at the head table. Flanking Colton, they looked triumphant. Miles was already loosened by the free-flowing scotch, his face flushed with the victory he thought he had secured. Cynthia was preening, adjusting her diamond necklace, smiling at the cameras. They thought they had survived the meeting at the villa. They thought their threats had worked. They thought I was back in my box. Gideon Vale stood up. The room went quiet. The ambient chatter died down to a respectful hush. Gideon walked to the microphone stand in the center of the stage. He did not look like the joyous father of the bride. He looked like a man who had come to burn a kingdom to the ground. He tapped the microphone once. The sound echoed through the cavernous room. "Thank you all for coming," Gideon said, his voice steady and low. "Usually, this is the part of the evening where I tell you how much I admire the groom and how happy I am to welcome his family into mine." He paused. He looked down at the head table. Miles raised his glass, grinning. "But I cannot do that." Gideon continued, "Because to welcome this family would be to welcome a lie." A ripple of confusion went through the crowd. Miles's smile faltered. Cynthia froze, her glass halfway to her lips. "There is someone here tonight who should have been at this head table for the last 27 years, Gideon said. "Someone who was erased so that others could shine." He looked up, scanning the room until his eyes locked on mine. "Kendall," he said softly, "please come up here." Every head in the room turned. 300 people looked at me. The old Kendall would have withered. The old Kendall would have looked for the nearest exit. But I stood up. I smoothed the silk of my dress, and I walked. I walked past the tables where people whispered. I walked past the neighbors who had ignored me for 2 decades. I walked up the stairs to the stage and stood next to Gideon. He put an arm around my shoulders. It was heavy, warm, and claiming. "This is not the Graham's charity case," Gideon announced, his voice ringing out with absolute authority. "This is not their servant. This is my daughter, Kendall Vale." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum. And then, the explosion. Whispers broke out like wildfire. Daughter. Did he say daughter? What about the Grahams? Miles stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He laughed, a booming, fake sound that fooled no one. "Gideon," he shouted, waving his hand, "you have had too much to drink, old friend. This is a misunderstanding. We can talk about this in private. Sit down." "Miles," Gideon said. "I am not sitting down," Cynthia shrieked, standing up beside him. "This is slander. You are ruining Colton's day. That girl is confused. She is unstable." Gideon nodded to the AV technician at the back of the room. "Show them," he commanded. The massive screens behind the stage, which had been displaying a slideshow of Colton and Maris's engagement photos, suddenly flickered. The romantic images vanished. In their place, a document appeared. It was the DNA test results. The text was blown up large enough for the people in the back row to read. Probability of paternity 99.9%. Then the screen changed. It showed the Gemini Trust ledger for 27 years. "I sent money to this family to care for my daughter," Gideon narrated, his voice cutting through the gasps of the crowd. "Over $1 million. Money intended for her education, her health, her future." The screen flashed again. It showed the side-by-side comparison: withdrawal $50,000. Purchase Tiffany & Company. "They spent it on themselves," Gideon said. "They bought boats. They renovated their house. They bought the very ring that is currently on my daughter Maris's finger." The crowd turned to look at the head table. The admiration was gone. In its place was the one thing social climbers fear more than poverty disgust. But theft was not enough. Gideon continued. They needed to keep her trapped. The screen changed to the credit report, the loans, the credit cards, the identity theft. "They forged her signature," Gideon said. "They ruined her name to save their own. They turned my daughter into a servant in her own home, financed by her own inheritance." Cynthia was shaking her head frantically. No. It was an agreement. Your father said we could keep the surplus. We raised her. We gave her a roof." Maris stood up. She didn't look at the screen. She looked at Colton. Colton was sitting there, pale as a sheet, staring at the evidence of his lifestyle being broadcast to the entire Dallas elite. Maris took off the ring, the 3-carat diamond that had been bought with my freedom. She walked over to him. She placed the ring on the table in front of him. It made a sharp click against the china. "This wedding ends here," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried perfectly in the silent room. Colton looked up at her, his eyes wide and wet. "Maris, wait, please, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." Maris looked down at him with an expression of profound pity. "You knew, Colton," she said. "I saw the emails. You knew she was drowning, and you just wanted to make sure the car payments cleared." She turned her back on him. She walked away from the head table and came to stand at the bottom of the stairs, looking up at me. She nodded. A silent salute from one sister to another. Colton scrambled out of his chair. He looked at his parents, who were frozen in horror. He looked at the guests, who were filming with their phones. He realized there was no exit. He ran toward the stage. "Kendall," he cried out. "Kenny." He stopped at the edge of the stage, looking up at me. He looked exactly like he did when we were kids, and he had broken something, begging me to take the blame. "Tell them," he pleaded, reaching a hand out. "Tell them we are family. Tell them I loved you. You can fix this. Kenny, just tell them it is a misunderstanding. I am your brother. We are a team." I looked down at him. I looked at the boy who had watched me scrub floors while he played video games. The boy who had let me believe I was worthless so he could feel important. I took the microphone from the stand. I stepped to the edge of the stage. "I am not your teammate. Colton," I said. My voice was calm. It didn't shake. "And I am not your shield." I looked out at the crowd. For 27 years, these people told me I was lucky. I said, They told me I should be grateful for the food I cooked, for the floor I cleaned, for the corner of the house I paid for. They called me their daughter in public and their maid in private. I looked back at Colton. You do not need a sister. Colton, you need a cosigner. You need a victim. You need someone to stand in the shadow so you can feel like you are shining. I took a deep breath, but the shadow is gone. My name is Kendall Vale, and I am not silent anymore. I handed the microphone back to Gideon. At that moment, the side doors of the ballroom opened. They didn't burst in. They didn't have sirens. It was 3 men in dark suits and a woman with a badge on her belt. They were from the district attorney's office, accompanied by a forensic fraud unit. They walked straight to the head table. Mr. and Mrs. Graham, the woman asked. Miles looked at them. He looked at the room. He looked at the exits. There was nowhere to go. The illusion he had spent 30 years building had shattered into a million sharp pieces. We have a warrant for your arrest, the woman said. Charges of wire fraud, embezzlement, identity theft, and grand larceny. Please come with us. They didn't handcuff them. They didn't have to. The shame was a heavier restraint than any metal. Miles stood up, his legs shaking so bad he almost fell. Cynthia was sobbing, a high, thin sound like a wounded animal. She looked at me one last time as they led her away. There was no hate in her eyes anymore, only fear. They were marched out of the ballroom, through the gauntlet of the people they had tried so desperately to impress. The guests parted like the Red Sea, recoiling from them. Colton stood alone at the table. The investigators didn't take him, not yet. He was left in the wreckage of his own life, watching his parents be engaged by the law, watching his bride walk away, watching his sister stand on a pedestal he could never reach. He sat down and put his head on the table. Gideon put his hand on my shoulder again. It is over, he whispered. I looked at him. No. I said, it is just starting. Later that night, the ballroom was empty. The guests had gone, leaving behind a buzz of gossip that would fuel Dallas for a decade. Gideon and I sat on the edge of the stage, drinking cold water from crystal glasses. I have set up the foundation, Gideon said. The Vale Renewal Foundation. It will focus on financial abuse. It will help people who have been trapped by their families, just like you were. I want you to run it, when you are ready. I looked at the water in my glass. I'm going to college first, I said. Gideon smiled. It was a real smile, reaching his eyes. Redwood Bridge University has a great business program, he said. I might know a few people on the board. I shook my head. I will apply. I said, on my own, with my own grades, and I will pay for it with the money you recovered. Gideon nodded. He looked at me with a mixture of pride and pain. I want to be your father. Kendall, he said softly. I want to make up for the years I missed. I looked at him. I saw the regret. I saw the love that had been frozen for 27 years. You cannot buy the time back. Gideon, I said, you cannot fix the childhood I didn't have. I stood up and smoothed my dress. But you can get to know the woman I became. I will learn to trust you, step by step. But I am not a project. I am your daughter, and we do this on my terms. Deal, Gideon said. 6 months later, the campus of Redwood Bridge University was painted in the oranges and golds of autumn. I walked across the quad, a backpack slung over one shoulder, holding a cup of coffee that I had bought with my own debit card. I wasn't the oldest student in my class, but I was certainly the most focused. I sat in the front row. I raised my hand. I devoured every book, every lecture, every opportunity, after class. I drove to the downtown office of the Vale Renewal Foundation. It was a small space, but it was busy. We had a hotline for victims of coercive control. We had lawyers who volunteered their time to help young people untangle their credit from their parents. Maris was there, working the phones. She hadn't gone back to her old life either. We were a team now, a real one. Kendall, you have a visitor. Maris called out. I walked into the main office. Gideon was standing there. He was holding a large, framed photograph. I thought you might want this, he said. I took the frame. It was a photo from that night at the wedding. Not the staged photos, not the paparazzi shots. It was a candid photo taken by someone in the crowd. It showed me standing on the stage, the microphone in my hand, my head held high, the green dress glowing under the lights. Gideon was standing just behind me, looking at me with pure, unadulterated pride. And Maris was at the bottom of the stairs, smiling. It was a photo of a family, not a perfect family, not a family without scars, but a family that stood in the light. I walked over to the wall behind my desk. I took down the generic landscape painting that was hanging there. I hung the photo in the center of the wall. I stepped back and looked at it. I looked at the girl who used to hide in the laundry room. I looked at the woman who was now running a foundation. I wasn't invisible anymore. I touched the glass of the frame, right over my own face. I wasn't born to serve. I whispered, a smile touching my lips. I was born to live. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Please drop a comment below with your city or country so we can see how far Kendall's story has traveled. If you enjoyed this journey of justice, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this video get discovered by more people.